When you are playing a sport and you think in the future, you lose. You got to focus on the moment. And I know that I was a pitcher, so I had to focus on every pitch. And if you're a hitter, you're focusing on every pitch that comes your way. I don't care if you're a basketball player focusing on your shot, a football player focusing on the ball that you're trying to catch for a touchdown. You got to focus on the moment in time. And if you veer away from that, that's when we start failing.
Josh, it's great to have you on today. Really excited to hear about your journey so far. What's next? And before all that, how it all began. I know that you were pretty big into baseball at the very start. Could you share a little bit about the early arc of life and baseball?
I wanted to be a baseball player, like so many kids growing up. That was my dream. My first word was Bill Buckner. He played first base on the Chicago Cubs at the time.
Wow.
Later went on to the Red Sox and certainly played a role in the Mets' victory in the World Series a little bit later on. But for me, life was all about baseball. When I woke up, I was thinking about baseball. Went to sleep thinking about baseball. Little League was the most important moments of my childhood. I was playing for my life, I felt like, far too serious. And I certainly cared a lot more than the other kids. And a long time ago, I was pretty good. No longer, but a long, long time ago, I was pretty good, and it certainly was a dream of mine through my childhood and into college too.
Did you find yourself being obsessive with baseball?
At the time, I was. Uh, for what I'm doing now, I can kind of feel like little 12-year-old Josh in me a little bit, just thinking, okay, what can I do that puts me at a different position in terms of separating myself from competitors? How can I work harder? How can I think differently? What can I do to train myself to be more effective at the time pitcher than others? So it was certainly something that I just wanted to excel at. And I think maybe obsessive could be the right word for it.
So were there any other hobbies or obsessions you had from a young age that sort of lent you to where you are now?
It wasn't hobbies, Daniel. It was more of just that I cared about animals, but it wasn't in terms of like some philosophy or read some deep book. It was just, I was just a kid and I just hated when I saw an animal in pain. I hated if I saw a documentary that showed animals suffering, driving down the road and saw, an animal on the side of the road who was hit by a car.
Yeah.
I was just very sensitive just to the idea of animals ever being in a very bad situation, especially at the hands of people. I have maybe some type of instinct against bullying, and maybe because I was bullied when I was a kid. And I just feel, and I certainly felt at the time, that when people do bad things to animals, it's the ultimate act of bullying because these animals don't have a voice. They can't call the principal. They can't have parents do something to protect them. They can't call the police or the local state legislature. They just are the ultimate victims. And I think that understanding also propelled me to have even further sensitivity just to the wrongness whenever animals were harmed. And that was at an early age. I certainly, this is pre-internet, and I didn't know the expanse of which humans could do some pretty bad things for animals. But I think my instincts were always pretty good about making sure that we work to try to have a more humane world.
Do you remember that first moment of tremendous empathy that you felt for animals, a particular experience or memory?
The first thing that I can think about is just being around my dogs that I grew up with. I had a dog named Hector. He was a big Saint Bernard, the size of a bear. And when
Wow.
when you're a little boy, these dogs are bigger in your view than maybe they are when you're an adult, just because of the size differential. And he never really liked me very much, but he always liked my dad. Uh, and I just remember, always trying to love him and cuddle with him and pet him, but he's never into it with me, only with my dad. But one day I saw the documentary about how animals are raised for food, and just I just felt this connection in terms of these animals being treated so poorly compared to my dog at home being treated so well, and what really is the difference between the two? Shouldn't all animals be treated well? And it was kind of that connection that helped drive me to care about the things that I certainly care about today.
What a beautiful story. What age were you when you saw this documentary?
I believe I was about 15, 15
Okay.
or 16. And this is back in the VHS days.
Oh yeah.
So for some of your listeners who may never even seen a VHS tape before, but we actually went to a video store, which also don't exist today. And for whatever reason, my friend and I got this documentary, and it was horrible. It showed terrible things, and I'm grateful forever for getting that, because without that, especially in the 1990s, it's not the easiest thing to come across what's actually going on
Right.
behind closed doors of these facilities where animals are raised and killed for food. So it was by chance that I saw that documentary, and grateful for it. And it certainly changed my life. And I was always leaning in a certain direction, but it really helped illuminate the path that I was going to go on.
Maybe jumping around a little bit here, I think it'd be really interesting to hear the story of how you snuck in or came in as an investigator into one of these slaughterhouses. I think that story is really interesting.
Well, one of my first jobs working to help animals was as an undercover investigator. And so these facilities treat animals so poorly, whether inside factory farms where 99% of animals are raised. These are giant windowless sheds where tens of thousands, sometimes hundreds of thousands of animals are confined, never taking a step outside, never seeing sunlight, never feeling the grass underneath their feet. So inside these warehouses, bad things are going on. Inside the slaughterhouses, other bad things are going on too. And big animal agribusiness knows that ordinary Americans would not like to know what's happening, and they'll be appalled. And they know that certainly their products would suffer in the marketplace if the truth was out there. And so it was very hard, and it's still to this day is very hard to ever get footage of what's actually happening. I think we should all be concerned when that's the case and we're putting things in our body that those that are producing those products don't want anyone to see how it's done. And so back then, Daniel, what we tried to do is to get jobs in facilities and have equipment to document what was occurring. So, as one example, I got a job in a slaughterhouse, as a chicken slaughterhouse, and I was hooked up with a hidden camera, and it was for a big chicken company. So, I remember waking up super early in the morning. The shift started, I think, about 4:30 a.m., if I recall. Groggy, nervous, had this equipment all strapped to me to be able to film what was going on without others knowing what was happening within the facility. Driving, in the dark in the early morning, getting there, and then walking into this big chicken slaughterhouse. You walk in kind of through these big doors to get within the big facility, and then within it, there's a section where the animals are killed. So it was just waiting in the locker room as they gave you the type of overalls to wear and the hairnets to put on and the gloves to cover your hands. And my anxiety was rushing. I was just nervous that I was going to be caught. I was nervous what I was going to see. And eventually, they brought me and the other workers into what's called the shackling room. And that's the room where birds are shackled before they're killed. So I was right in line with, if I recall, maybe 8, 10 other workers where my waist was, there was a conveyor belt. And I looked to my left, and on my left, at the end of the conveyor belt, goes to the outdoors where the chickens I could see were dumped by this giant truck onto the conveyor belt. So this mass of white was approaching me. This is the first day on the job. And my heart's racing and racing. And I could see as I got closer, workers started to shackle the birds. And they were getting most of the birds until one bird got through to me. I was on the end. And I knew that was the moment that I would have to shackle the first bird for me. So I grabbed her leg, and I could tell just in grabbing her leg that her legs were all twisted, because chickens in the meat industry, their legs are all disjointed and incapable of standing on because of the selective breeding. These chickens are so big that they're full size after just about 40 days. So these legs that I'm grabbing are all twisted. They're certainly, in some cases, I look down, they're broken. And when I lifted up the bird, she flapped her wings to try to escape. She pecked at my hands. She tried to scratch me to try to remove herself from this horrible situation she was in. And I shackled her. And that was certainly a profound moment in my life. Just thinking, what we do to overpower these animals who did nothing to hurt us at all. And the amount of fear and pain we inflict on them is just shameful. And what also impacted me was knowing that there's nothing more important, at least for me personally, than being effective. Because whether I'm effective or not made the difference, whether future chickens were going to have to go through the same type of pain that this chicken did. And so it was no longer a philosophy or interesting theoretical exercises about the treatment of animals. We're talking about real life here. We're talking about actual animals who, if most people would just have them sit on their lap, they would just pet them. But within the food industry, they're living in horrible conditions and killed in ways that would disgust our hearts. So that was the first moments on the job. I did numerous undercover investigations and what's called open rescues, where I'd go into facilities and remove animals and try to get media attention on it. And then once you see it firsthand, you realize that no matter what you see on film or in photographs, being there, the darkness is even deeper than you can imagine.
That sounds difficult. It sounds difficult to have been able to do that yourself as a part of your investigation. How long did you do that, the shackling?
So that particular job, I was there for, if I recall, a little over a month. And there were other jobs that I did throughout several years, whether it's picking up the birds and putting them in cages to be put on trucks to be sent to slaughter, or doing the open rescues that I mentioned earlier, where many years ago, what I would do was just go into these big barns, they're warehouses, and go in there in the middle of the night, document how these animals are treated, take some of the birds who were in the most dire need of medical attention to a vet, and then eventually take those birds to a sanctuary to live out their life. And the idea, and this is the early 2000s, was, we could get some good attention on this issue. It was very hard for anyone to ever even know what was going on. But by doing those things, by being open about it, saying, listen, hi, I'm Josh Balk. I'm out here with these birds. It got a lot of coverage, whether it's the Washington Post or New York Times, and then expanded from there. So that was certainly strategies we used in the early 2000s to start getting attention for these animals.
I understand the emotional component that you've mentioned so far. I mean, seeing these different animals, I would pet a chicken if it was in my lap for sure, and I would not. I would hate to see it be put to death. From a ethical standpoint, is it fundamentally a defending of consciousness and sentience? And if so, like how do you find where the line is?
I think that's a little bit too deep for me. I'm more surface level of,
Sure.
I just don't like pain and suffering.
Hmm.
So if I see anyone, I don't care whether it's a human or an animal, I don't like
Hmm.
anyone in pain at all. I don't want anyone
Sure.
to suffer at all. And so how I look at it is less about, consciousness and sentience, more of, hey, are these animals in pain? If so, that's terrible. What can I do to try to at least reduce their pain, at least make their lives better? And most of my life has been to move animal agribusiness in a better direction.
Hmm.
As an example, most chickens in the egg industry are confined in small cages. Their cage is about the size of a home microwave. And imagine 8 chickens in your home microwave. That's the way most chickens are raised in the United States and around the world. So much of what I've done is to at least move much of the egg industry to cage-free systems where it might not be utopia. They may not be able to go outside. They might be in a barn with too many animals, thousands of other birds, but at least they're able to run around within a warehouse and perch and dust bathe and scratch and lay eggs in a nesting area. So rather than living a maybe 0 out of 10 life, maybe go into a 5 or a 6. And that seems to be a something that is worth my life fighting for. So when we think about it, I believe everything that I am fighting for, almost everyone agrees with. And that's a
Hmm.
great position to be in. I believe that I'm just flat mainstream. I just don't want animals confined in tiny cages where they can't move. I think they should be able to walk around.
Hmm.
And I think that actually represents most people. And
If
that's
they
one of
saw
the
what was
reasons.
going on, is that right? Like if like most people were aware, but there's just not an awareness, right?
When people know, they are on my side for sure. And you're right, is that I believe most people are good people. I think most people don't like to think animals uh, are suffering. And if they do find animals suffering, are against it. And I think that's a great place to start, is knowing that most humans don't want animals to suffer. So the question is, there's a gap. Most people don't want animals to suffer. That's good. However, raising animals, especially in the meat and egg industries, there's vast amount of suffering. So there's a huge gap in between. So how do we bridge that gap between how animals are raised and how people feel animals ought to be raised? And that's where my efforts have been in trying to get food companies to switch to things like cage for eggs, or passing laws to ban these cage confinement systems, is to reflect not my own views, but the views of most people in the United States and frankly around the world too.
We've made some progress in the last 15, 20 years since you've been in the industry, Proposition 12 being a great example of that. I know that you understand the necessity of the baby steps, and you're pushing, folks on one end that are more extreme to be patient, and folks on the other end who are less aware to be, to take these smaller steps. But what does maybe the ideal end state look like in some distant future? Like, what does like a perfect world look like for you, like from your perspective?
Well, I don't really think about it that way. Maybe I'm wrong not to think about it this way. I just believe in more short term endeavors. Uh, Bill Clinton once said, never think about your next election because the one right in front of you could be your last one. And so for me, I'm not envisioning some utopian world in 50, 100, 200 years when I'm dead. What I'm thinking about is what is going on now and what can I do to change it if it's bad. And Daniel, the calculation that I have in terms of where I focus is this. It's threefold. One, numbers. Where are the farm animals in terms of the number of animals being raised? Is it the chicken meat industry? Is it the pork industry? Is it the dairy industry? Where are the most number of animals? All right, that's one column. Next column, where's the most amount of suffering? Because
Mm,
some column might have fewer animals, but they might suffer more.
mm,
And the third column, and this is critical, is tractability. Where can we actually make a difference? There could be areas of suffering that, my gosh, this is a challenging one. Maybe go back to that one in a couple of years, but there's some things right in front of us we can advance. Let's do that first. So that's how I view where to focus my time. Where the number of animals, where's the suffering, and what's tractable, where can we advance? That's my framework. Thinking about utopia, at least that's not in my mind at all. And it served me well because it's hard enough for me to advance things in the short term, let alone thinking so far ahead in the future.
So where do you think is the area of greatest traction right now?
Cages and crates. So most chickens, as we talked about in the egg industry, are confined in those tiny cages. Most mother pigs in the pork industry are confined in tiny cages as well. These are cages so narrow the mother pigs can't even turn around. Pigs are as smart as dogs, actually smarter than dogs in most scientific studies. And yet they're treated as if they're machines, as if they're commodities. These mother pigs are lined up in these giant warehouses like parked cars in these narrow cages, barely larger than their own bodies. They're there for their entire 4-month pregnancy. They move to a different cage, also too small for them to turn around, where they give birth and they nurse their young for 3 weeks. And then the cycle continues again and again and again for years on end. So for years, these mother pigs can't even turn around. Now that's barbaric treatment of any animal. And it's certainly cruel to do to these mother pigs. And it happens by the millions in the United States and the tens of millions around the world. So what is tractable is to get rid of these cages for chickens and these cages for pigs. And here's how we've done it. And we can go deeper later. What we can do is pass laws to ban these practices. You mentioned Proposition 12. So it was a ballot measure I led in 2018 in California. And for those listeners who don't live in ballot measure states, about half the states do allow a ballot measure. In states that allow it, a government gives you petitions where you can get something on the ballot. So when you vote for president or senator or governor, you can put your own question on there too if you get enough signatures. In California, you need maybe 500, 600,000 signatures. So it's very challenging. But we got something on the ballot in 2018 that banned the production and the sale of eggs, pork, and veal from caged animals. So we got it on the ballot. And during election season, I was going up and down the state debating animal agribusiness on TV, on radio, in front of newspaper editorial boards, debating why it is a good thing to get rid of these cages and hopefully encouraging people to vote yes for Proposition 12. We would do rallies. We would do door knocking and phone calls. It was as if I was running for governor, but thank goodness people weren't voting for me. They were voting for the animals. And at the end of the day, on election day, we won with 2/3 of the vote.
That's incredible.
And so what it showed is that ordinary people throughout the state, 2/3 of them roughly, said, absolutely, these animals shouldn't be confined in tiny cages. We vote to ban these practices in our state. And we've passed similar laws in about a dozen other states across the country, in red states, purple states, and blue states alike, showing that protecting animals from harm can be a nonpartisan affair. We've also, and what I'm doing now is getting food corporations to enact policies to stop using eggs and pork from these caged animals. And so if we were talking 10 years ago, Daniel, we would be saying, oh my gosh, it's so terrible. The percentage of chickens out of cages is low single digits. The percentage of mother pigs out of cages is low single digits. Now, both in the egg industry and the pork industry, cage-free is more than 40%. More than 40%. For the egg industry, that means more than 100 million egg-laying hens annually are free from cages. That's a massive advancement to reduce suffering. And with the pork industry, that means millions of pigs are out of these cages as well. We have more to go, roughly 60% of the way to go, but we've made a lot of progress. And I feel very confident we're going to get to the 100% mark in the coming years.
So maybe switching gears a bit, but still connected. The accountability board is a very interesting undertaking. I know that it's an active investor in more than 100 companies. How does it hold these companies to their commitments, especially like when it comes to verifying the actual numbers of like cage-free animals, et cetera?
The accountability board is an investor in more than 100 of the largest companies around the world, many involved in agriculture, energy, tech. And when it comes to animal issues, how we hold these companies accountable is first, we reach out to the company as investors and we engage with executives related to the treatment of animals. And again, we work on other issues too, but we're going to focus for this conversation on animal issues. And we ask them as shareholders, hey, where are you at on the commitments that you've made? Are you following through or have you not taken steps? So as investors, we can have these type of conversations. For many of these companies, when things are not moving in a direction that we feel is appropriate, we file what's called shareholder proposals. Now, in the United States, Canada, and other countries, if you're an investor with a certain amount of money in a company, you can file a proposal that goes on what's called the proxy. Every investor gets a proxy in the mail. You can vote on things as an investor. Who's on the board? Executive pay. You also see things like revenue and other data from the company. Well, we put something on there too, and it's a proposal that shareholders can vote on. And what happens is that we file with the company in the fall. That's how you do it. You send the proposal to the company saying, "Hi, company." Usually it's the general counsel's office. General counsel, this is our proposal that it would be put on the proxy to be voted on in the spring. Let us know if you'd like to talk. So between the fall and the spring of the next year, that's the negotiating time when companies, by and large, come to us and say, hey, we got your proposal. Let's talk. Maybe we can find some middle ground here. And that's when we have these discussions with executives at these companies. And we have been able to have many of the largest advancements, the most impactful advancements for farm animals in history through these discussions. So as an example, McDonald's switched all of their eggs to cage-free in the United States and Canada 2 years faster than they originally even planned. And they used 2 billion eggs a year.
It's incredible.
2 billion eggs a year. Talk about impact. Imagine how many individuals we would have to persuade to stop buying eggs from chickens confined in cages compared to persuading one company like McDonald's to switch to cage-free eggs. That's the efficiency of working with companies to make type of large-scale change that we're looking to do. So McDonald's is one example, but we've worked with and gotten virtually every fast food chain, whether it's Burger King or Arby's or Taco Bell, virtually every family breakfast chain like Cracker Barrel or Denny's or IHOP, consumer packaged good companies like Kraft Heinz, Unilever, food service companies like Aramark, Sodexo, and many grocery stores as well to switch all of their eggs to cage-free or at least create benchmarks that they are hitting on their path to get to 100% cage-free. So that's how we get these advancements. I think it's as effective as it comes to creating change. It's also a way to create change in the most professional, high-level manner that at least I'm aware of. And I'm proud about the success we've had so far.
How much of a stake do you have to take in order to be able to submit such proposals?
By US law, you need more than $25,000 in a company to have at least for 1 year. And then that amount is reduced subsequent years. So you can do those proposals anything above that amount. You can own $5 billion in our company or $1 million or just above the 25,000. But you have to have at least the $25,000 in a company for the first year.
Is there like a point of diminishing returns after that first 25K? Or in theory, you could just have 2.5 million for those 100 companies and be able to accomplish what you need to accomplish?
For shareholder proposals to be successful, you have to write in a way that doesn't just appeal to you. Even if you have $1 million, $100 million, even $1 billion, you have to do it in a way that actually would appeal to the majority of ownership of the company in order for the proposal to have any strength to it. So I would say that you're right, is that there are diminishing returns. We always craft every proposal as if shareholders have no, I'm not saying this is true, but we write it in a way as if they have no ethics related to the treatment of animals. They just care about the profits of the company. And
Yeah.
we want to make sure that we hit an important social issue, also in a way where investors like, this makes sense to me. Whether the issue itself resonates with them or not, they still feel, you know what, I think the company should do this.
I've noticed that reading about the like different kinds of work that you do, you're always trying to convince capitalists where their capitalist incentive lies. I think that's a very interesting take. It's one of the things I find most interesting about your work. Have you ever found it difficult to convince an investor where they could actually be making more money, but they had a fundamental like difference in like ethical view?
I have never found an investor have a different ethical view related to any of the issues we're pushing forward. The areas where investors often ask is, hey, I might agree with you on this issue on a personal note, but tell me, I have to go back to our team to say, how will this help the bottom line too? And I get that. And fortunately, there's nothing that we advocate, that we encourage companies to do, that will harm shareholders. In fact, it's the opposite. As an example, when we work with companies to switch to cage-free eggs, to stop using eggs from caged chickens, of course, that means better treatment of the animals. That's obvious. However, it also means less food safety risk. It also means being ahead of regulation, with companies typically like to do. It means higher quality of products. It also means higher trust among consumers. So those are all true arguments about shifting to cage-free eggs as an example. In addition to the basic argument that these animals shouldn't be treated in this cruel and inhumane way either. So holistically, the issues we push, one of the reasons why we're successful is because they are embraced by a whole host of people, no matter where they're coming from and no matter where the investment community views this particular social issue.
You'd mentioned food safety risk. Is that primarily as it concerns antibiotics and pandemics?
It has less to do with antibiotics. Antibiotics aren't typically used in the egg industry. It typically has to do with the amount of stress these chickens are forced to endure when
Mm.
they're confined in small cages. So, picture 8 chickens confined in a cage the size of a home microwave. They can't move even an inch without bumping into another bird within that small cage. They can't even extend their wings, meaning that they're constantly frustrated and filled with suffering throughout their life. They never even stand on solid ground ever. They're forced to eat, sleep, defecate, and lay eggs in the same small spot every day their whole life. And because of that, stressed out birds who are having a real tough life, are more likely to get sick and spread things like salmonella. And that's why organizations like the Center for Food Safety advocate for the egg industry to switch to cage-free eggs. Same thing, related to food quality, even, high-end restaurants whose chefs may not have much concern for the treatment of chickens use products from places that are cage-free or free range where birds even go outside because they feel that the quality of the products are certainly better than products from animals who were barely able to move an inch their entire life.
I believe that I read a few years back that cortisol from stress and like the hormones that are injected into like the different animals that we're eating, these cortisol and hormones are often passed on to us humans and also affecting like how the onset of puberty looks like, sometimes causing it to happen earlier. Is this true?
I'm not sure about the science on that. What I can tell you is that certainly human beings, are approaching puberty sooner than in past generations. I know a lot of folks claim it's because of milk consumption
Mm.
and the type of hormones and other things that are put into dairy cows to push them to produce more milk. What I will also add is that how animals are raised today is so far from natural that it's no wonder why it's causing a lot of serious health implications to consumers. So if you think about, chickens who are raised, pre World War II, almost all the chickens were running around outside. They typically had a good life until, the last minutes. They're out there, scratching on the ground, looking for seeds, eating bugs, and they were strong and they were able to actually walk.
Mm-hmm.
These days, it's far different. Chickens in the meat industry are packed together in these warehouses where they can barely move an inch. They're so packed together by the end of their life. And they can barely walk because they're so obese. And as mentioned before, they're killed at a little past 40 days of age. So all chicken meat in the United States comes from baby chickens. And that's because they've been selectively bred to grow so fast. Talk about eating products that are completely unnatural. With eggs, buying eggs from chickens confined in cages, what an unnatural way to raise an animal, confining an animal in a cage where they can't even extend their limbs, or a pig unable to turn around. The unnaturalness of animal products these days is certainly an area of concern. And the overconsumption of these products has led to an increase of heart disease, of cancer, diabetes, and other ailments, when these are the type of health issues that were not prominent 50, 100, 200 years ago. So certainly how we're raising animals has had a detrimental effect on consumers for sure.
How much better off are the chickens that are laying the cage-free eggs from McDonald's? I mean, I'm sure that McDonald's isn't, taking them back to the good old days from how we raised animals hundreds of years ago. I'm sure it's some kind of baby step. What does it actually look like in practice?
You're right. It's not utopia. We're not picturing you, Daniel, having 12 chickens in your backyard, and every morning you give the chickens feed by hand and you snuggle them in at night. That's not the case. What is the case is that they are out of cages. They are able to run around within a warehouse, unable to go outside. That's not ideal. There's still thousands of other birds. That's still too many. But they can engage in basic behavioral needs. And if you compare being confined in a tiny cage where you can't move to being raised within a warehouse where you're at least able to run around and you can perch and engage in activities with the other chickens, and because chickens are social creatures, so they like to hang out with each other. If you're able to lay eggs in a nest if you're a chicken, these are all serious advancements for these chickens. Now, you and I might not know what it's like to have the need to lay an egg in a nest. We never will. But I can tell you, it matters a lot to chickens. It really does. And in these cages, they literally never can do it. They have to lay eggs confined with the other chickens in those cages. But in all the cage-free barns that are producing eggs for McDonald's and cage-free for the rest of the United States, they do have nest boxes where chickens go in and lay their eggs. And that is a massive step forward for the treatment of these chickens. And that also goes to show how bad things were when we have to celebrate the idea that chickens are laying eggs in a nest. That should be baseline bottom standard. Yet we had to fight and crawl to get to that baseline bottom standard because of how badly things have been going for decades on end within the egg industry in terms of the treatment of chickens.
Do you think it's harder to hold companies accountable for their existing commitments or to get companies to make new commitments?
It's equally challenging.
Yeah.
Equally challenging. Some companies actually want to do good. And some companies, as an example, companies like Unilever, which is one of the largest consumer packaged good companies on earth. This is a company that has been a leader to try to move the cosmetic industry away from animal testing, has been a leader in switching to cage-free eggs, has been a leader of advancing more plant-based offerings for consumers. And that's a thriving company. Good for them for showing how capitalism can do very good for the world. Uh, that is the minority. Most companies do have to be pushed to move forward. And what I have found is that I believe most people who work at companies are good people. I believe at home, they're probably a good husband or wife or a good father or mother. They probably treat their dog or cat really well at home. They might even donate to their local shelter. At the same time, once they enter the building of their headquarters, I have found that companies instinctively try to race to the bottom unless otherwise pushed. And the problem that these companies have is when they race to the bottom, it's actually not even good for the company. They think it is because maybe offhandedly they think, hey, why don't we just get whatever the cheapest thing is available? That's best for the company. That's best for saving money. It's best for profits. The problem is that beyond the ethical implications of buying products like eggs from chickens confined in cages or pork from pigs confined in cages, beyond the fact these animals are suffering to such an extreme extent, is actually bad for their business. And a lot of times it takes a little bit of nudging for these companies to realize that. And part of the reasons why we have been successful getting these companies to switch to cage-free eggs, as an example, is because they did come to the realization it is better for them that they did it. And that is good. My hope is that they come to realization on other issues too. That rather than keep fighting for a status quo of race to the bottom, they more quickly come to the belief that, wait a second, maybe this isn't so good for the long-term interest of shareholders or a company for us to keep racing to the bottom here. I mean, there are so many companies where their suppliers have been exposed for animal cruelty and food safety concerns and other severe issues. And I know at those moments, those companies were thinking, gosh, what were we doing? Why were we buying those products? That didn't make any sense. And those companies, in most cases, have made changes since then. So hope springs eternal. I certainly hope companies keep moving in a better direction, but at the same time, we're there to keep pushing them to do it.
Are there times when animal welfare is at odds with investor financial gain, with the exception of future risk profiles?
Not the issues that we push. We don't push issues that are at odds with shareholders. And maybe one day there will be some issues out there that there's some conflict, but certainly not the issues that we push. As an example, McDonald's, to go back to the company that switched all their eggs to cage-free, they weren't moving the way they should to stop using pork from operations where mother pigs are confined in cages. And that led to a major PR scandal where my team worked with someone named Carl Icahn, who is probably the most famous, what is called an activist investor in US history, to take on McDonald's and nominate two people for the board of directors because we felt as if the board was not doing their job to follow through on commitments that were very important to shareholders and customers. And that led to more media attention related to treatment of farm animals in history and a massive scandal for McDonald's, where McDonald's had to spend tens of millions of dollars to fight off this board battle. And there's no way that was good for McDonald's. And later on, the company has since moved in a better direction when it came to animals. And so I right now can't think of an issue where it is better for companies and shareholders that animals are treated horribly. Maybe that will come, but so far it's not anything that we're pushing.
So we look to the perspective of like the work that you're doing at the accountability board, maybe switching gears to hear about how you guys made products that people want and like cultivated meat. The work that's been done there. Would love to hear how that's been going. I know the company has grown pretty large. It's, I believe, had $1 billion valuation at one point. How has that journey been, and where is it headed?
I founded Eat Just with my longtime best friend. His name is also Josh. We grew up
Oh yeah.
together. Uh, I wanted to be a baseball player, as your listeners now know. Other Josh, wanted to be a football player. So we grew up trying to be professional athletes. Well, neither of us got there, but we became dear friends along the way. And it also helped probably push our work ethics and our tenacity that then translated to taking a leap to try to do something that more times than not fails, and that's to start a company. And so the idea was this, is that I still remember years ago, I met with General Mills, and General Mills was using eggs from caged chickens. And I
Mm.
gave a presentation about why they should switch to cage for eggs. And everyone in the room agreed. There are all these executives there. They couldn't have been friendlier and more compassionate in their view. But at the end of the meeting, they said, okay, Josh, I think what we can do is switch maybe 5% of our eggs to cage free. And it just broke my heart because they felt that they were constrained by cost, they were constrained by supply to move in a direction they knew was the right thing to do. And these were good people saying it. These were not bad people, shameful people who were saying we can only go 5% of the way. These are good people who felt constrained. And I was thinking, what can we do to put products out there that don't come from chickens confined in cages, that are plant-based, that ordinary Americans and major companies can choose if they so want to, instead of keeping a status quo, and not feel like they have to pay more, not feel like they have to lose taste, not feel like they have to lose the structure or the product quality. And so I approached other Josh with this idea of creating a plant-based egg product, whether it's ingredients to replace eggs from chickens, or maybe one day creating an actual scrambled egg that's plant-based. He thought it was a good idea. So we put it together and launched a company in 2011. And thanks more to him than me, it's been a huge success. The Just Egg product, which is a plant-based egg product sold in every major grocer in the United States, is in the egg section. And all you do is pour the liquid plant-based eggs in a frying pan. You scramble it up just like you would with eggs, and it's scrambled eggs. They also have a frozen egg product where you just get, it's kind of like someone goes to McDonald's, there's like an egg patty with an egg
Mhm.
muffin. It's like that. The frozen plant-based egg patty. Just put in the toaster, you're done. Put in a piece of toast, you eat it, it's delicious. Also have burritos, sauces and dressings. And what is wonderful about it and what is really inspiring to me is that more than 95% of people who buy these products, and the sales are going extremely well, more than 95% of people, they're not vegan, they're not vegetarian. These are ordinary people that are just trying to eat better. They're
Mm.
trying to eat more plant-based, maybe because they have higher cholesterol issues. They maybe understand the impact of animal agribusiness on the environment, so they're trying to take a step to eat more plant-based. Maybe they start to learn about how animals are treated, and they're trying to take some moment in a day to choose compassion
Mhm.
versus cruelty. And if it was a whole bunch of vegans buying it, I wouldn't be as pumped up, but it's certainly not. And so the sales were great. And pretty soon there's going to be a plant-based chicken that's launched, and that is also phenomenally delicious. Tastes just like chicken breasts that I remember when I was a kid. And I couldn't be more thrilled with what the company is doing, and doing in a way that is big tent. It's bringing everybody in. I don't care who they voted for. I don't care what their diet is. You're on the team. Just try the product. If you like it, keep buying it. If you try it, you don't like it, hey, so be it. I appreciate you giving it a shot.
How's the texture of this chicken?
I'm telling you that everyday chicken eaters would have a problem knowing that this is plant-based. In fact, there was a study about a month ago with self-identified chicken meat lovers. That's who they were, chicken meat lovers. Not that they
Mm.
like chicken, They love chicken.
Loved chicken.
Love chicken. Love. Not even past tense, Daniel. You said loved. Love as in current.
Loving now.
Right now. And they were in a room and they were given all these different varieties of actual chicken from birds and also the Eat Just plant-based chicken. And it was a blind taste test. They didn't know what they were trying. They determined that the Eat Just chicken tastes the best.
Wow.
And only at the end, we're like, oh, by the way, do you know that was plant-based? And they were shocked. They couldn't believe it. So this goes in this theory that there is virtually no one who wants to harm animals. There's no one who wants to go out and buy products and have a breakfast, lunch, or dinner that came from an animal who's abused. People are good. And so all we have to do, in my mind, is allow people options so people can eat the way they really are.
Mm-hmm.
And how they really are good people. And as long as we can give them stuff that's delicious, I think we're moving in a good direction.
With the chicken, the plant-based chicken, is there a nutritional density difference when it comes to protein and diversity of amino acids?
There's just as much protein as in chicken from birds and chicken meat from birds. And there's no cholesterol. Cholesterol is a huge issue in the United States and other parts in the world. And products that are entirely plant-based have zero cholesterol in them. So we're talking about a high protein, low calorie, zero cholesterol product. And I think it's pretty good too. I think it's extremely good.
Yeah.
I will say, I know I'm biased. It's a company that I co-founded. I get it. I get it. At the same time, I just hope people try plant-based products. Try Eat Just products or try others. That's all good too. I want all the companies to succeed. And what I can tell folks is that there are enough plant-based products out there that you're going to find something you like. You might go to the market and try it, and the grocery store, like, all right, I'm gonna go home with 6 different veggie burgers. Maybe you like all 6, maybe you like 2 of the 6. That's all good. At the same time, you will find some that you like. And as long as we just keep trying to incorporate it more into our diet, it's not about perfection. I'm not perfect. You're not perfect. No one's perfect. As long as we keep trying to incorporate this stuff into our diet, we can really move things along forward. And I think a lot of times we just have to give some of these products a chance and just try a whole bunch of them. Just know that you're not going to like some, but others you are, and maybe eat that a little bit more often.
We've made a lot of traction with vegan diet options being available. Are there how large would you say the nutritional gap is in terms of like nutrient density, amino acid density, protein density, et cetera? Do you think that gap is completely closed or almost closed? Where do you perceive it to be?
Look, several things. One is that when we talk about like plant-based food or vegan food, remember the healthiest diet likely is a diet that is focused on things like beans and vegetables and fruit. Most people think if that's where your focus is, you're probably eating pretty well. And so, yes, we can talk about new plant-based burgers and plant-based chicken fingers and plant-based eggs and all those good stuff. Absolutely. Let's talk about it. At the same time, if we want to be healthy and that is the sole focus, likely it is good to focus on those whole foods plant-based products in the market. If our protein comes from beans and whole grains, if our fiber comes from different types of vegetables, choose any vegetables you want. Really, at the end of the day, just eat some vegetables that you like. As long as we eat more fruit and we reduce the amount of animal protein, you're likely going to be eating a diet that's pretty healthy. So let's start with that. Now, onto the plant-based meat products. There's some plant-based meat products that are fried and they're just delicious and they're not meant to be the healthiest product on earth. They're just like, hey, these are plant-based chicken fingers. They're darn good. Enjoy them. Watch a football game with them. And that's what they're meant to be. They're not trying to hide anything. I would say that's good. If you want to enjoy that, wonderful. Keep in mind that most of the folks that when we're eating these animal products, we're eating animal products that aren't so healthy for us. They have a lot of fat, a lot of cholesterol, often fried. Whether when chicken, often chicken meat, typically still has antibiotics in it because the chicken meat industry just just laces the chicken feed with antibiotics because the conditions are so terrible. The antibiotics are the only way these chickens even remain alive. Think about that. Eating meat from a chicken who otherwise would have died if she wasn't laced with all these drugs to keep them alive in these horrible conditions where they're forced to stand in their own waste with tens of thousands of other chickens. Do we want to, is that what we want to have to be the centerpiece of what we eat? So if we want to try plant-based products that perhaps aren't as fun as like a fried, chicken patty or finger or nugget, yeah, there's a lot of good, healthier stuff out there too. There's veggie burgers that are very low in fat and high protein. There's some veggie burgers. Some folks like veggie burgers that are more like mashed up vegetables that like have more of a vegetable feel. Like that's what my dad, he's mostly plant based. He's 86 years old. Good for him. And he loves sweet potato veggie burgers. My brother loves the veggie burgers that have like corn and broccoli and kale and grains kind of mashed in. So it's just like a health patty type of thing. He loves that stuff, and he's not even vegetarian or vegan, but he enjoys that. So my point is, there's such variety, Daniel, to talk about. Whether a product has reached a certain point, there's too much variety to even answer that question because there's products out there to meet pretty much what anybody is looking for these days.
We've come a long way because I don't think 20 years ago there was such a variety available to us.
That's true. That is definitely true. I mean, when I started to try to reduce my meat consumption when I was in high school in the 1990s, my gosh, it was challenging to find obviously it's easy to find vegetables and fruit and beans, and maybe I should have stuck with that. I would have maybe had a healthier childhood, but there weren't the plant-based meat products that are available these days. You're exactly right. Just Egg, as we talked about, is at every mainstream grocery store. You don't need to go to a natural food store or a Whole Foods. Go to any major grocery store. They'll have the plant-based egg, Just Egg, in the egg section. By the way, you go to the frozen meat section, you're going to likely see different types of veggie burgers these days that are typically pretty darn good. And by the way, in the milk section, you're going to see more variety of plant-based milk than you could possibly dream. You go to a coffee shop, there's now a list of 5 different plant-based milks sometimes. There's so much variety these days. You're exactly right. Is that now more than ever, it's easier to start make these steps forward into our diet. And I can't stress enough, it's not about the last step. It's about the first step. As long as we just start taking these steps and trying some of these products, I think we can come together and see, hey, we can start making tangible advancements in the near term to reduce the stress within animal agribusiness of raising so many animals for food in such horrible conditions.
The startup roller coaster is full of very high highs and very low lows. What were some of the lows at Eat Just in the journey?
Well, it's always hard to raise money for a startup, and that's in any sector of the economy. Right. And so I would say that there were some challenging times from 2011 till today that it was really hard to raise money. And sadly, other startups had to close shop. Frankly, I'm not saying it's even their fault. It's just that sometimes an economy shifts in a certain direction that is harder to raise money in given sectors. And so, thank goodness, we got through difficult times of trying to raise funds to continue. I can tell you is that the company's in a very good position now and is very sturdy and growing and economically sustainable. So I would just say overall, you ask any founder, most of them would probably say raising money was a big stressful component of the company's existence.
What does your work look like day to day? What do you spend most of your time doing? I know you guys have scaled quite a bit. I think you're past 200 people. Like, what is the highest leverage use of your time that you spend every day at Eat Just?
So I devote very little time at Eat Just these days. I'm full
Yeah.
time at the accountability board where we're working with these food companies on various issues, including animal welfare.
Mhm.
So each day, typically there are meetings with these food companies, with food company executives and other companies, by the way, on other issues. And these meetings, they're lengthy, they're sometimes intense, uh, and they're continual. When you're vested in well over 100 companies, there's a whole lot of negotiations that go on. So that happens virtually every day. There's some type of meeting or meetings going on. Simultaneously, I'm also working on legislation. And right now, as we're talking, Daniel, there's very bad legislation that was introduced in Congress called the EATS Act. That legislation has been pushed by the pork industry. And what it would do is wipe out most of the farm animal laws in the United States. The pork industry fought to stop Proposition 12 in California, that ballot measure we talked about earlier. They lost. They then sued California, saying it was unconstitutional. That lawsuit went all the way up to the Supreme Court. I devoted a year of my life, and now I have a lot of gray hairs working on that case. And we won. We won at the Supreme Court in a big upset. Predicting markets said that we would lose, but no, the Supreme Court of the United States ruled that California had the right to pass such a law. So the pork industry was 0 for 2. And now what they're trying to do is go to Congress and have a federal law that supersedes all the state laws, banning states from having such type of rules that mandate that pigs, God forbid, have to be able to turn around. That's how messed up the United States pork industry, by and large, is that the leadership of the industry is devoting so many resources, tens of millions of dollars, and their major lobbying power in DC to try to overturn laws that simply say pigs should be able to turn around. Think about that. That's how far off this industry is with societal norms, with how animals ought to be treated. So I'm devoting a lot of my time uh, lobbying in Congress and doing other type of work with coalition members, including pig farmers who've moved away from gestation crates, to prevent this legislation from passing.
What's a gestation crate for our viewers who might not know?
Thank you for asking. Gestation crates are those cages where those mother pigs can't turn around. So where these mother pigs can't turn around, it's during their pregnancy in these crates, and it's when they're gestating. So that's why those cages are called gestation crates. For 3 weeks, where I mentioned that they are nursing their young, that's a different crate called a farrowing crate. Again, they still can't turn around. And when they're done nursing their young, they're put back in that gestation crate. It's that cage where they can't turn around for that cycle to continue for years on end.
Did I find the right one here?
Yep. There you go.
Pretty terrible.
So for those who are watching, I mean, we're talking about a facility where these pigs are confined in a cage where the cage is barely larger than their bodies. They can't turn around. They're just lined up as if they're inanimate objects. The only thing that happens in terms of the treatment of these pigs is that there's food that is put in the front, and the waste is hosed out from the back, and that's it. And there's no animal husbandry. It's just treating these pigs as if they are machines. In fact, when gestation crates, those cages, were invented, pork industry management booklets told pork producers to, quote, treat pigs as if they are machines. And so when you see these animals as if they're machines, you can understand how they're treated so poorly. If I threw my chair away and just threw the chair in the dumpster, people are like, who cares? It's just a chair in a dumpster. But if you view a pig as if this pig has the same moral standard as a chair, then you can do things to a pig like put the pig in a cage where she can never turn around. And that's how the pork industry has taught producers to treat their pigs, and that's why conditions have gone so poorly.
Could you have imagined when you were a kid or a teenager that you'd be having so much impact in the world today?
Well, I hope I'm making an impact. I feel like
Don't be modest. Let, you've been
so.
doing some pretty tremendous work.
You're very kind, and I'm grateful to be part of such a great team doing all this work that we talked about today. When I can tell you, when I was a kid, I certainly was envisioning me more pitching for the Chicago Cubs than waging a ballot measure in California to get chickens out of cages. So it's definitely different than I envisioned. What I can tell you is that when I was, raised mostly by my dad, the heroes that he would always talk about are those who fought to make the world a better place. He taught me, and he also taught in high school as a teacher about Gandhi. He taught about the civil rights movement. He talked about heroic Jews and Gentiles who saved folks during the Holocaust. And so when you're living in a household where you're constantly hearing about those who have fought to make the world better, it penetrates you that to want to have similar value, you want to also try to make a difference, at least in your own way. So I did have such a thought that I wanted to make some difference. I don't know whether it was during my baseball career, probably afterwards, but I certainly wanted to try to make the world a better place. I think that for a lot of the time, I just didn't know what to do. And I know in college, I still didn't know what to do. And so my big campaign in college was on baseball road trips, was for the cafeteria to offer peanut butter and jelly sandwiches for players who wanted to choose to eat a vegetarian meal on the road trip. And so that was my first big win, so to speak.
That's funny.
So I don't know if that standard holds today where I went to school, but I certainly at the time I was really proud of what I did. But at the end of the day, at least for me, I basically feel as if I'm just a tool to try to make things better, frankly, until I die, and then hopefully others carry the torch and be more effective and do even better work.
Were there moments along the journey where you had doubts in the conviction for what you're working on? Or has it always been like very straightforward, very easy, very empathy and compassion led, like no doubt of any kind?
I never had doubts related to the conviction that I've had related to trying to do as everything I could to reduce and hopefully stop the suffering of as many animals as possible. To me, it seems so obvious. We just don't want animals to suffer. There wasn't like, it's not like a tax policy. They're like, gosh, the pros and cons of this type of tax policy versus this type of tax policy, or some type of, foreign negotiations where it's like, oh, you give and you take. To me, it's really clear. If we can stop suffering, we should stop suffering.
Mm.
So I've never veered away from that. What I can tell you is that I've evolved in what strategies that I've used to try to make the impact. Certainly years ago, I did things at the time I thought were effective. Looking back, I'm thinking, my gosh, Josh, what the hell were you doing? And I'm thinking, if you and I are talking, Daniel, in 5 years, there are going to be things I'm doing now that I probably would think, oh, come on, I wish you did better. So it's more of evolution of trying to be more effective than an evolution away from caring about the treatment of animals.
When you've talked about a distant utopian future, among peers or maybe early on in your journey, did you find that it would disconnect and distance the audience that you're talking to, whether it's one-on-one or to a group? And like, I can tell that you're really trying to make it one step at a time, and I'm sure that helps keep folks engaged to some extent. Like, what was your findings when you would talk about things that are just too far out?
It's less about other people. It's more about me. I'm just not motivated about that. I just feel like it's almost fanciful to talk so far into the future.
Mhm.
It's just disconnected from what's in front of you.
Right.
It's almost like, if I had a dog and my
Mhm.
dog had cancer, and dogs sadly have had cancer and passed away, that I want to focus right now. What do I have to do to cure my dog of this cancer?
It's
And not
immediate. It's in front of you.
right in front of me. It's right. I want to do it now. I don't want to think, gosh, what would cancer treatment look like in 5, 10, 30 years from now? What type of dog would I want 30 years from now? What type of life would I want? It's right in front of my face.
Mhm.
At least for me, and I'm not saying this for everybody, and other people can look more in the future, and if that works for them, fantastic. It just does not resonate with me to look so far into the future. I need to look at now. And I got to tell you, and maybe that is part of coming from the athletic background that I previously had, is that when you are playing a sport and you think in the future, you lose. You got to focus on the moment. And I know that I was a pitcher, so I had to focus on every pitch. And if you're a hitter, you're focusing on every pitch that comes your way. I don't care if you're a basketball player focusing on your shot, a football player focusing on the ball that you're trying to catch for a touchdown. You got to focus on the moment in time. And if you veer away from that, that's when we start failing. So it does not resonate with me to talk so far in the future. So it's
Mhm.
not some strategy for external purposes. It's more about just who I am.
Is a fully plant-based society still too far in the future to think about as realistic?
I don't know whether that would happen or not. I leave that to others to decide. What
Sure.
I can tell you is that it is certainly better for the world if we eat more plant-based meals. It is better to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. It's better for our health. It's obviously better for
Mhm.
animals, that are fewer animals are raised inside these horrible factory farms and killed in these slaughterhouses. So it is certainly a better thing if we start moving in a plant-based direction. And when I'm talking about starting moving, I'm talking about studies that show that if someone just bought local, and that's all they did is buy local food, but they kept eating the same amount of animal products, they all bought local, compared to someone who did Meatless Monday. The person who did Meatless Monday and then just kept everything else the same reduced greenhouse gas emissions more in terms of their impact than someone who bought local every single meal that they had. The, if we believe in the science of climate change, there's no way we can meet any of the goals to hit some Paris Climate Accord or even anything close if we continue to eat as much meat as we do. And listen, there's going to be a big variety of us, hopefully, that move in a better direction. There's going to be some folks that go vegan. Great. There's going to be some folks that go vegetarian. Wonderful. There's going to be some folks that do meatless Monday or vegan before 6 p.m. or any iteration of the above. As long as we keep moving in that direction, that's what I'm looking at more short term versus a plant-based future 50 years from now, 100 years from now, 150
Sure.
years from now.
It's hard to look that far out.
I'm not
Yeah.
smart enough to do it, Daniel. Maybe others are, but I'm not.
I think if anyone's got a chance, it's probably you, Josh. I don't think you give yourself enough credit in terms of like seeing what's around the corner. You saw a lot of what was around the corner even 15 years back. So would love to pick your brain more on that perhaps another time as things develop. I know you've been using capitalism as a tool to create change. Do you think there are going to be limitations to how far you can create interventions with capitalism? And if so, what other kinds of tools can be used to create more meaningful interventions?
The two interventions that I have found to be most effective are capitalism and basic uh, democracy. Capitalism through these corporations making changes, and
Mhm.
democracy being able to pass these laws.
Sure.
Uh, so, what I would say is that there's nothing inherent about capitalism that should make things worse for animals or the world in general. There are a lot of great companies that are excelling, doing really good work in the world. And there are a lot of companies that are failing that have been doing bad work in the world. And I would feel differently if ordinary people just did not care at all, at least
Mhm.
about the treatment of animals for our topic today, then I'd be more concerned. But I cannot imagine a world that it doesn't help companies excel in a capitalistic society if they do better for animals. I can't imagine any company losing market share because customers learn they're doing better for animals. That's why I feel really confident that capitalism uh, has been and continue to be used to improve the treatment of animals. Simultaneously, what I also believe is that it is important to pass laws because
Mhm.
there's some things in societies that should be banned. I think we can all agree that there shouldn't be dogfighting. We don't it, this having dogfighting as a free market opportunity. I think is something that we probably don't agree with. We probably don't agree that hey, let a free market rule whether people can light their pets on fire or have cockfighting fighting rings in their backyard. I think we all agree. You know what? There should be some rules here, some basic societal ground rules that ensure some level of a compassionate society that reflect social norms when it comes to treatment of animals. I happen to believe that the way we treat farm animals, it is outside of those norms. And when brought to ordinary people's attentions, they agree with me too. We talked about California's Prop 12 passing the law that bans the sale of eggs, pork, and veal from caged animals. The first state where voters banned the confinement of those pigs in gestation crates, those small cages, was Florida. The second state was Arizona. We're talking about red states where Republican voters were saying, no, this should not be allowed. I don't care if someone makes a profit off of selling meat from animals who are abused. This has just crossed a boundary. And so, yes, red states have shown that the consumers and voters agree with this sentiment. Blue states have shown it. The swing states have shown it banning these practices. So, yes, I would say the combination of using capitalism and having some type of legal framework is the formula to keep moving things forward for the treatment of animals.
Wouldn't you say capitalism is the reason that this race to the bottom, this through the commoditization of these products and like being able, like these antibiotics, these gestation crates, these like horrible living conditions, the maximization of yields through like having like the chickens grow up normally fast and large, like aren't these driven by fundamentally trying to reduce cost per like unit per kilo?
Well, if that was the case, then wouldn't capitalists, I'm sorry, communist and socialist countries in this theory treat animals better? It doesn't happen. They use battery cages too. They use
Sure. I'm
they use
not trying to
gestation
like
crates too.
go
Yeah,
all the way to yeah,
sure,
I think there's a lot of problems with communism and socialism on its own.
sure,
I'm not trying to argue for a different system. I'm just trying
sure.
to understand like what are the limitations of capitalist incentives? I know that
Well,
you've
I think
go ahead.
yeah, I think that here's the limitation is that mistakes get made because we're humans. I make mistakes, you make mistakes, we all make mistakes. And yes, companies try to cut costs. That is typical in a capitalist society, in any
Right.
industry. However, oftentimes that leads to mistakes. That oftentimes leads to less safe cars. That leads to
Right.
food safety concerns. Even forget about animal products for a second. Are we in a good position if a food company cuts costs by reducing what they do to help ensure that their food is safe? We're not cool with that. What about are we good with airliners cutting costs by reducing safety measures? Of course not. So we know that in a capitalist society, industries try to cut costs. They do. I get it. Hopefully, corrective measures are made when the things that they try to cut costs for were actually not beneficial for the company. So you are right, is that the advent of these cages for animals was not because they wanted animals to be tortured. They weren't invented by some monsters who just loved animal suffering. Their belief was that, hey, let's cut costs. And, maybe animals don't matter that much. At least that's what the industry is telling us now. They don't matter
Right.
much. I think you're right. What I can say is that corrective measures had been made. We're working on it, but part of the reason why we've gone from single digits cage free to mid 40s for both cage free eggs and crate free pork is because corrective measures are being made now. And I promise you that McDonald's is a very much capitalistic company. And that's just one. So, same with their competitors and the other food sector giants that have shifted in a better direction. They're still capitalists. They are making a capitalistic decision that it is better for the company and shareholders to improve the practices that are going on in their supply chain. So that's all part of capitalism.
Fair points. Fair points. Well, I'm curious with the accountability board, how is the scaling of the impact going? Only a few years in, and what does the trajectory look like? I think that's like I think it's a fascinating way to make an impact by taking stakes in these companies. What's the future look like, and how global is it going to be? Because it seems more promising than legislation.
I think you're spot on. Is that it's very hard to pass laws, and there are just so many companies out there that are global that if one company, maybe based in the United States, has a global commitment to take action for animals, all of a sudden you're getting animals out of cages in Eastern Europe and in Asia and in Africa and South America because a company maybe headquartered in the United States will make a global policy to go cage free. So maybe we're not going to pass a cage free law in China anytime soon. But if these fast food chains tell their suppliers, listen, we're switching to cage free eggs, guess what? Those chickens get out of cages in China without a law. So you're exactly right, is that it is more efficient, at least right now, to work on these policies in the United States and globally with corporations than it is to pass these laws. I still think the laws should be worked on and passed. It just has to be more efficient right now to work with these companies. So what I would say is that what we're trying to do is short term, trying to get these animals out of cages and crates in the United States. The next step we're taking is that these companies typically have global policies, but they haven't moved globally. It's hard enough sometimes for them to even take steps to follow through with the commitment in the United States.
Right.
And when they pledge to do actions on a global scale, they push back even harder about following through what they promised to begin with. So much of our effort will be focused on ensuring that their global commitments are fulfilled. I mean, if you look at all the top food companies in the United States, the fast food chains, the consumer packaged food companies, all of them, they all have global footprints. So a big focus is to make sure that they're followed through outside the US and we can get animals by the tens of millions and overall hundreds of millions out of cages in places around the world where we're not going to pass laws, certainly not in the near term.
How does the auditing of these cage-free commitments and other animal treatment commitments look like? And what are like the metrics that you really look at to look at compliance?
Yeah, that's an important question. We do not accept agreements where a company would just simply put something on the website and say, okay, great, we're good. We just put it on the website.
Greenwashing.
Greenwashing, absolutely. Another thing they can do is just delete it from their website next week. There's no law that says I can't delete something from a website. And that's what we've seen companies do, is have policies that they have had on their website for years. And then when we ask them, how's that going? They look, uh-oh, wait a second, it's gone. Exactly right. You nailed it. So what we push the company to do is for them to put in places where they can't just delete it. We're talking about reports to shareholders. We're talking about updates from the board of directors. We're talking about other places where it's not a quick, hey, delete a sentence from a website. It's more serious in terms of trying to revert backwards. A lot of these companies we even have contracts with in terms of following through with these policies. And so it was a mistake I made before. We talked about looking back and I'd said about mistakes I made. I just thought companies could be trusted that they put something on their website. I'm like, okay, great, done. Look how naive I was. I know what an idiot I was.
Yeah.
Huh? I know. I wish you and I talked all those years ago. You'd be like, Josh, come on, don't be so
Josh,
tough.
don't fall for it. Come on,
Don't fall
man.
through it. That's what you would tell me. Don't fall through it. Well, I did. I fell through it. So that's what happened all those years ago. Most of these food companies had my name in their press releases or a colleague's name in their press releases when they made their original commitments. And then years later, when following up, where are you at? They've done nothing. And then a lot of time they get deleted. So now I'm working with them like, hey, company, here's the link of your press release. Here's my name in it where I was in it. And this is so long ago. I trusted you do this. You all didn't follow through. And so we're going to move forward via shareholder channels to hold you accountable. But our preference, of course, is to find some ground here where you actually follow through with the very commitment that you promised you'd do.
So how does that look like in the nuts and bolts? Like to get a little one level deeper, like how do you measure compliance and audit compliance? Do you have do you audit from someone internally that you have or an external company? Do you require some kind of proof? Like what does it look like in terms of actually like ensuring that the real world outcome is happening?
Absolutely. What happens is that we only accept that these companies put their new commitment or their new promise, whatever it may be, somewhere where it matters much more to reflection of shareholders. So there's a serious nature behind it,
Mm-hmm.
like their ESG report, sustainability report, annual report, some type of report that goes to shareholders. Then, in terms of keeping the progress, part of the agreement is they have to provide annual updates in that report. And so these are reports where they legally can't lie to shareholders.
Mm-hmm.
Companies can put stuff on websites all the time. Best
Right.
tasting burger in the world. Come on. It's fine. But in reports to shareholders, no. You can't just lie to shareholders. You get in serious trouble for your company. So for these companies, you have to put your commitments in some type of report that goes to these shareholders and annual updates. So it's not like, oh, great, you did that. Wonderful. We're never going to check back in. No. Annually, you're going to update shareholders in those reports where you're at. So that's how we ensure that companies are actually moving forward. And in the United States and in many parts of the world, products like eggs come from third-party audited systems. So in the US, virtually every single cage for egg comes from an operation that has been third-party audited. And so there's also that ground auditing too. So those are the reasons why I feel comfortable once a company makes a commitment and provides annual updates in these reports to shareholders that movement is happening. That's why. Before that, a static statement on a website that says we're going to be cage free in 10 years that never changes 1 second ever, and then turns out they've done nothing to follow through. That's the type of stuff I look out for.
So what does the scaling of the accountability board look like the next 5 years or so?
So we have a good team. It's not very large compared to other organizations that might have 300, 400 people. At the same time, we work with serious law firms in many countries around the world. We have experts on our team that understand the most effective and legally proper way to write shareholder proposals, that are expert negotiators with companies, that understand how to do work with the SEC that oversees shareholder advocacy. That's the Securities and Exchange Commission. And so, fortunately, this work doesn't require too many people. We don't have really a bureaucracy here, which I enjoy.
That's great. Yeah,
Very, very
bureaucracy is
much.
terrible.
There you go. You know it. You know it. At the same time, we're making quite an impact with the type of force that we have.
On your deathbed, what would you like to see that you've accomplished?
I don't have. You're starting to ask longer term goals, and I say longer term because I hope it's a while. So we'll
Me
see.
too.
We'll see. We'll see how it goes. We'll see how it goes. Uh, I just want people to know I fought, and we'll see what happens from there.
maybe like a specific, more ambitious goal will help you push you further than you otherwise would have? I mean, personally, I don't believe in participation trophies. Is there a finish line you have in mind?
I don't trust me. Amen to that. I would say short term, but this is hopefully I continue to live after this.
Sure.
Is trying. I do want to get all these animals out of cages, and we're talking about 320 million in the United States. We're talking about several billion around the world. So we're talking about massive number of animals.
Yeah.
And if
It's
that's the only
huge.
thing that I do on Earth, and maybe the company that I co-founded is pretty successful at helping people eat more humanely, then it'll be a good life.
Yeah. That sounds pretty impactful to me. What advice would you give aspiring entrepreneurs looking to attack social issues? Maybe not in the domain of like animal treatment, but in other domains. I imagine it's much harder to raise capital. I imagine like the infrastructure isn't quite there for it. Like there's some things that perhaps don't always align with like market incentives. What suggestions or advice would you give an entrepreneur starting out today?
One of the reasons why I think Eat Just has been successful is that it created a product that it just made sense that it existed, that just did not exist yet. And it makes total sense. Even egg producers work with the company, by the way, that there at least should be a plant-based offering in the egg section, just like there is in the milk section and the meat section. And just knowing that is so much of the battle, is knowing that it just makes sense. There's so much that goes into startup work that is so challenging. And I give so much credit to anybody who does a startup. What I think is just the first place to start is as soon as you say the idea, hopefully most people think, you know what? Wait, that doesn't exist? Huh, that should exist. That's a good place to start. And outside the animal world, I don't know all that, what that would be. What I can tell you is that having options for major egg product users for their cookies and baked goods, for them to have an option to use plant-based ingredients, that just makes sense as an option. And the other products having a plant-based chicken that actually tastes just like chicken, that just makes sense to do. Whether it's to be successful, who knows? Who knows? But at least it makes a lot of sense. So that's the first place I would start. Next place I would start is there's literally nothing that I have done, Daniel, that I accomplished by myself. Nothing, literally zero. And part of founding a company or taking a leap and doing something pretty special is finding someone or a team to do it with that you're ready to go into battle with. I can tell you the things I'm most proud of in life. It's California Prop 12 ballot measure. I also spent about a year of my life on, or Eat Just, or the work of the accountability board that I'm doing now. Zero of that I could have done by myself. I was so lucky to have dear friends work together with me, and I work with them to accomplish this. So if you're looking to found something, find a couple folks that want to go in with you, because you don't want to do this by yourself. Probably not going to be successful. It's going to be really lonely. Go in with someone else too.
I imagine the kind of individuals that have joined you in the journey are much more missionary minded rather than mercenary minded. Is that right?
Well, you can be missionary and mercenary. You can be missionary as in, hey, I'll do this for a solid year. I'm going all out because I believe in this.
Mhm.
After a year, I'm going to move on to something else.
I guess that makes sense. You can pursue something you deeply believe in and still be exchanged fairly. I guess that's not the
You
premise
can
is
do
not
that.
quite
I
great.
get your point, though. I got your point. What you're right is that uh, the success that at least what I've been part of, almost all of it had to do with people who believed in the mission of what we were trying to do. And you're right. It wasn't like we really succeeded because this outside consulting firm did X, Y, Z. That never gets the job done. It's good to have outside firms help on the periphery. Absolutely. I'm so grateful for so many that have. But you're exactly right. Is that, in my view, bringing on just true believers who are missionaries on whatever you're fighting for. Believer, if you want to start a new type of car business or new AI company, whatever the mission is, I just want people who are obsessed and willing to fight and have courage and are good people. That's the type of folks, certainly, that I would love to work side by side with.
How do you invest in yourself to be a better version of yourself every day? Like, to be able to create more impact, you have to be like refilling your own cup, both like energy wise and knowledge wise. How does that look like for you?
I could do a better job. Uh, Certainly, what I'm trying to do to be better, and I have not gotten there yet, and I hope to be better, is that I read a lot, and I read books that hopefully inspire me to do better. And I love reading books about history and leaders, and take things away from those people in those historic situations that can translate to my life or what I'm doing.
Hmm.
So reading is a major component for me of trying to be better. Also, in terms of refilling the cup, so to speak, I love football, and you know what? I got to tell you, it's just enjoyable to sit down watching my Chicago Bears, who typically lose, but just like not checking an email, just like not thinking of something out, in the serious world, but just lose myself for like 3 hours a week during football season and just enjoy the game. I, you know, I That really helps. Even if they lose, which they most likely do, every almost percentage wise most of the time, it really helps me just kind of come back to the work, mindfully refreshed.
What books are you reading right now?
I just finished a book about John F. Kennedy, and so much of the book was about the Cuban Missile Crisis. And what helps me in reading these books sometimes is putting things in context. When I'm thinking I'm having a bad day, imagine trying to be president during a crisis that could literally end the world. And there were times during that Cuban Missile Crisis where, folks who may not know, but there were nuclear missiles in Cuba in the 1960s, and President Kennedy and Premier Khrushchev had to negotiate some type of end to it. And if they didn't, that would have been it, game over. And there were times during that crisis where both sides thought it was over, the world was going to end. And there was even stories about a lot of the negotiators looking at the sun going down one night and thinking that's the last time anyone's going to see the sun go down. Now, here's my point. That puts a lot of perspective into woe's me. I didn't get a response as quickly as I wish I did in an email. and that helps center me and put things in a lot of perspective. And that grounds me in a place that I hope I'm pretty consistent in my emotional stability to handle the ups and downs of when things occur. So that's how I try to learn, and that's a book I just finished.
That sounds like a great book. I may read it. I'm personally a history buff myself. I love to read history books. What are some books that you would recommend to young aspiring entrepreneurs that have been helpful for you? They don't have to be like in the startup or self-help domain. They could be history, like leaders that you look to as exemplars. Anything.
My favorite book of all time, it's Team of Rivals about Abraham Lincoln. And this book is good for anyone who's an entrepreneur or someone's involved in government or anybody. And the reason being is that, this is just my opinion, Daniel, take it for what it's worth, but I feel like Abraham Lincoln handled a lot of tough situations better than most of us would have. And a lot of it is lessons that could translate to anybody. I'll give a couple things of what he did so well. Whenever things were going well in the Civil War, a battle was won, or or something positive occurred, he would never take the credit. He would always bring the credit elsewhere. Hey, no, don't come to me on that. That was because of General so-and-so. Go to General so-and-so. Say good job to him. Always raised other people up. And one, he did that because I believe he was likely a very good guy. But also, smartly, it helped continue to propel good actions because people were lauded for success. And just imagine, I think we've probably all been there where we did something good in life and then maybe someone above us, we kind of felt like, wow, they took a lot of credit for that. Huh, okay. We maybe have been there in life versus we've also been there in life when there's someone who was maybe the head of an organization pointed us out. Maybe it was at an all staff meeting. Maybe it was with some investors or donors saying, oh, hey, Josh, Daniel, come over here. Hey, investors, the reason why this sector of our company is doing so well, it's because of that Daniel guy right there. It's him. It's not me. He's a total star here. So grateful for him. All right, Daniel, go back to work. I just wanted them to meet you. Like that's the type of stuff that people don't forget. And I know that when people did that for me, I never forgot that. Never forgot that, including growing up playing baseball where someone was maybe the star of the game, but in interviews would say, oh, by the way, you should talk to Josh. He did X, Y, Z. I was always touched by that. And that's what Lincoln did in some of the most stressful, challenging circumstances that we could ever imagine, where many of us with egos would gladly take praise, but instead he thoughtfully spread the praise to others. That's just one of many examples.
Yeah, recognition is so important as like a founder or leader of any kind. Like there was this one conceptualization that I liked. I think it was from Good to Great. It was like the concept of the window in the mirror. It's like whenever things are going wrong, look in the mirror, like only blame yourself. When things are going right, like only look out like at the team. And I found that to be really impactful. And it's, I think like it really makes a big difference in an organization team trying to accomplish something. If they're all just trying to find ways to praise each other, it's
oh my gosh,
it goes so far.
Absolutely. And the thing is that because we're never going to accomplish something extraordinary by ourselves, we are going to need others with us. And don't we want to create a culture where we all lift each other up, knowing that's the only way we're really going to win? So I'm with you on Daniel. That's a great book. Good to Great. That's another good book too.
I think that might be a good place to end things on. Recognizing the value of others, like the contribution of others, the efforts of others. I think that's where it all begins. Any journey to greatness, whether it's animal treatment or anything else in the world, sustainability. Josh, it has been an absolute pleasure having you. I've learned so much from you today, and I'm sure our listeners will have learned plenty from you as well. Any parting words for us before we sign off?
Well, Daniel, I appreciate you. Thank you for having me on. Looking forward to hearing your other guests that you have on in the future, and really appreciate you being such a good person to bring these topics and these issues to everybody. So really just a lot of gratitude to you.
Thank you, Josh. It's been a pleasure.